Welcome back to the shop. This is Jim. Here's an update on the RV10 project. I think I've got the panel pretty much up and running now and configured. I struggled with a wire pin, a pin transposed on the GSU-25, the ARs, and I got that taken care of and then got everything running. But let me show you the document that I made kind of after the fact as I was struggling to try and find everything, and I'll show you some of the install manual things and explain why I think it's hard to do and maybe what I could do better the next time if I was doing another one. So here you see kind of a flow chart, if you want to call it, or a diagram, and I'm going to show you just one of these. So on that primary flight display I have 3 different serial ports in use, and there may actually be more than that, but this is an incomplete diagram here. There's more stuff than just what you see here that's all hooked together. Off of RS-232 port number 1, it needs to be map MX2 format, and that format is driven by or based on the fact that it's communicating to the GTN 650XI, and it just also happens to be going to serial port number 1. It could have gone to any port on that GTN that was available, and then it would still be map MX2 because of the protocol required for what is going on there. And I believe that is the port that uses that lets you tune and control the GTN from the primary flight display. So I'll show you that when we power up the panel, and then you see bunch of other stuff. So there is on port number 4, it's supposed to be connects 57.6 baud rate, and that's what is sending ADS-B information back and forth from the flight display to the transponder. And so you're probably getting traffic and weather on port number 4, and you see that on the GTX I used serial port number 3. So you want to make something like this diagram, and if you do it electronically or just hand drawn, after the fact it's easier to do this because then I know that this thing, the transponder sort of needed to be in the middle of this picture because it kind of spider legs out to different devices, and that's the problem that you would have if you're just starting out. You're not really going to know that. And all this information is scattered around in different manuals that makes it difficult to see that and understand it when you start out. So let's take a look at the panel, and we'll go ahead and power up. And I'll probably power up here, and then I'll shut down and power up again in the config mode so that we can demonstrate one of those serial ports. Let me get climbed in here. So we'll continue on the 650. And so here you see COM 1, that's my 650, then COM 2, which is over here, is the GTR20, I think it's GTR, that's my remote COM. And so I can dial, I can tune up the radio, the 650, from the g3x screen. So you can see here I've swapped that. Now if you watch the 650, I'll hit the button on the PFD and it swaps it there too. So you can control that 650 frequency from the PFD or the MFD or right on the 650. So now let me go into the config mode, and I'm going to have to hold some buttons here, so if you stand by for a second. So now I've got the 650 in the configuration mode. I was holding the home button while I applied the power, and I'm holding the menu button here so that'll the GDU will come up in the config mode. So now if we go over here to GTN setup and I go to serial ports, there's serial port number 1, map MX format 2 for input and output. And then if I come over here and look at serial ports on the PFD, you can see that serial port number 1 is set to map MX. It happens to tell us here that it's 38.4, which is just the default rate for map MX. And I don't know that there's not a format 2, so I'm not sure if that's a kind of a generic, because I don't think there is a straight map MX. Yeah, see, you see map MX format 2, but I don't think there's plain map MX. So that's the config screens. I'll shut this stuff down and climb out and show you what I was talking about on the install document. So what I started out doing, so here is the pages for the primary flight display. This is on the G3X system. So you can see here is a particular serial port number 3. Let me find number 1. So here it is right here. So serial port number 1, the color of the wire that I happen to use, which I think after you get stuff pinned in with wires and connectors and everything, this is a little bit less useful to know that, unless you made a mistake in your wiring, then maybe you'd identify it by the color. But so here you see I wrote down map MX2 goes to the 650. And where you find that stuff, that's the hard part, because then you have to find, in here you have to find the interconnect drawings. So here you see some of this sort of stuff, and I'm not going to find a good example for you right now, but in the interconnects it will tell you that sort of stuff. And here's sort of a good example of it, that on the G3X or GDU, the config mode for the serial port, you want to set it to Garmin instrument data, and so that is for whatever device we're talking about. So that's for a autopilot servo, looks like. So, and then if you come up here, you'll find, let's see, 232 Garmin instrument data, and sometimes they'll say that right on here, but I don't see it right off. And this is not a page that I focused on. Let me see if I can find a better one. Well, I don't see one, but when you get into the document, this is another example of guidance, where this is the place where you would find what you should set stuff to after you get it plugged in. So it's sort of a two-step process, but the hardest part for me has traditionally been knowing what the format or the protocol is for the particular channel. You need to make sure you're writing down what goes where as you're doing it, so that then when you get done, you can make the document or the diagram like that over there. Then one last thing here, this is sort of a troubleshooting thing that I made up. You'll probably have something like this, an alligator clip that I can clip onto the probe of my voltmeter. And then I've got a standard size female connector there that I can unplug, and then here I think this is the high density female. And then I can plug that in when I pull some device out of the tray. I can plug that into the connector without completely disassembling that connector, and then run the other end of it with the probe to where it's supposed to go, to double check to make sure that everything is wired up right. This has been sort of a long-winded rambling video, but I hope that helps, and we'll see you next time.